Good morning, respected dignitaries. The Chairperson of Mahatma Gandhi University and Medical College, Dr. Anil Sumanka sir, the Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. V.K. Kapoor sir, all the senior faculty members, colleagues and residents. Today is the 30th postgraduate combined rounds of the topic Approach to Vertigo, which is chaired by Dr. Tarun Ojha, Dr. Amit Agarwal and Dr. Tushar Prabha. I am Dr. Sherry Modi, Assistant Professor in the Department of ENT. We would like to start our presentation. I would like to invite Dr. Pragyan Bansal, second year resident, to start the topic.
Good morning, respected dignitaries. I, Dr. Pragyan Bansal, second year resident from the Department of ENT, will be starting with the introduction to vertigo. Vertigo is a condition that is often misunderstood but can have a major impact on a person's daily life. It is more than just a feeling of dizziness, it is a sensation that the world is spinning or moving when it isn't. Patient presents with complaint like imbalance, not able to walk, nausea, vomiting, and these experiences can affect vision and confidence. Making even the simple daily activities challenging for the patient, we can gain a better understanding of what's vertigo with his first-hand view with the patient of the facing vertigo. Each of these buttons represent different level of vertigo. Starting with a mild level of vertigo, you can appreciate a small shift to the screen to the left. This is the moderate level of vertigo. The shift is clearly visible in this. And this represents severe level of vertigo. Imagine experiencing this for minutes, hours and even days. The balance disorder present across various clinics such as ENT, neurology, general medicine, internal medicine and geriatrics. 20% of the referrals are for the dizziness, vertigo and unsteadiness. 25% of the general population experiences such episode in some point of time in their life. And 80% of these episodes are severe enough to seek medical health care. The prevalence of such episodes rises with the age. So these are the references from the standard textbook. That's why it's asked. Balance is maintained through the integration of three main sensory systems, the vestibular system, the visual system and the proprioceptive system. The brain continuously combines information from these three systems to keep the body stable and oriented. The vestibular system detects head movement, position and the acceleration. It helps the brain to understand whether the body is moving still or changing direction. Visual system provides information about the body's position in relation to the environment. It helps to detect motion, orientation and spatial awareness and acts as an external reference point for the balance. Proprioceptive system sends information about the body's position, movement, muscle tension and helps to coordinate movement and maintain posture without consciously looking at the body parts. Balance problems such as vertigo can occur when the signals conflict or one of the system fails. Now we will try to break down some commonly confused terms or under the umbrella term of dizziness. A spinning sensation with nystagmus worsening with the head movement, often associated with nausea, vomiting, but preserved consciousness is vertigo. A sensation of lightheadedness or giddiness, a feeling of fainting, occurring in episodes, is likely pre-syncope. A sense of unsteadiness and imbalance, more prominent while standing, often chronic, and there is no spinning, then it's disequilibrium. Motion intolerance or motion sickness is moving or swaying sensation even when the patient is still. So it is provoked by passive motion such as traveling by car, boat and flight and worsens when the vision is fixed. Oscillopsia is a jumpy, jerky movement or sometimes just can be blurring of vision. It can occur during movement with position changes or at least sometimes unrelated to the movement and usually demarks central origin. When a patient comes with a vertigo, it is essential to take a detailed history focusing on its onset, associated symptoms, characters of the symptoms, course of disease, and the positional elements if there are any. This flowcharts represent why it is essential to take a history, meticulous history. By a history, we can differentiate into true vertigo and conditions presenting similar to vertigo such as disequilibrium and syncope. Now focusing on the true vertigo, it can be divided into two parts, based on the cause, peripheral causes and the central causes. Each of these pathologies we will be discussing in detail in the upcoming slides. This table illustrates the differences between the central and the peripheral causes of vertigo. In the peripheral vertigo, the direction of nystagmus is unilateral. Visual fixation inhibits nystagmus. Patient tends to fall in the direction of the slow phase, and hearing loss and tinnitus are usually present. There is no neurological abnormality. While in central causes, the direction of nystagmus can be bidirectional or unidirectional. There is no effect of visual fixation. The direction of fall is variable. Hearing loss or tinnitus are usually absent, and neurological abnormalities are extremely common. This shows some non-vertigo causes of dizziness that can be grouped into endocrine causes, cardiovascular causes, hematological causes, and psychological causes. To understand the topic better, we cannot skip the term known as nystagmus. Nystagmus is a repetitive involuntary to and fro oscillation of the eye, which can be physiological as well as pathological. It usually begins as a slow pursuit movement followed by a fast, rapid resetting phase, and it is named on the direction of the fast phase. Now, I would like to call upon stage Dr. Sameer Rishi Jain, second year resident, to take up this presentation further.
See, vertigo and many other terms that you have used are basically technical medical terms, which we are aware. Patient is not aware. For the benefit of students who are present here, you have to tell what exactly the patient says in Hindi कि मेरे को क्या हो रहा है और आपको उनसे क्या आप सवाल पूछते हैं, which will help you to solve this dilemma. So what does the patient exactly say?
The patient presents with complaint like मुझे चक्कर आ रहा है, आसपास की चीजें घूम रही है, and खड़ा नहीं हुआ जा रहा, एक तरफ गिरते हैं, उठते हैं तो गिरते हैं हम लोग, and चलते हैं तब एक तरफ गिरने का कंप्लेंट लेके आता है. Then after taking history, we will ask patient कि ऐसा कभी होता है, नहीं होता है आपको, या किसी एक पर्टिकुलर डायरेक्शन में आपको स्पिनिंग लगता है, या फिर आपको लाइटनेस लगता है, या फिर एक बार खड़े होते ही बैठने की फीलिंग आती है.
So that is what I am saying, that one slide should have said that what direct question, because patient will not tell you all these things. He or she will tell you only the most prominent, most predominant symptom. Rest you have to ask direct question. So what direct question you need to ask so that you can solve the diagnostic dilemma? That is the importance of history.
Good morning everyone. I am Dr. Sameer Rishi Jain, second year postgraduate resident from the Department of ENT. Today I will be presenting on the topic approach to a patient with vertigo.
Teacher always write Department of ENT and head and neck. Just not.
Yes, sir.
I will don't put your
Yes. Observation begins even before the formal examination. Whenever a patient presents to an ENT OPD with a dizziness, it is essential to follow a stepwise structured approach. First, we observe the gait of the patient while entering the OPD, which already gives us a clue about the imbalance or the cerebellar involvement. This is followed by detailed history taking, then general physical examination, a local ENT examination including otoscopy or autoendoscopy, which is then followed by ocular examination, cranial nerve examination, then vestibular and cerebellar function test, audiological investigation such as tuning probe test and audiometry, and finally a video nystagmography which helps us to localize the lesion. Neuroimaging such as MRI brain is reserved for the patient with the red flag signs. History is an important diagnostic tool in a patient with vertigo. A simple and effective method of history taking is to ask about the duration of the vertigo, the direction of vertigo, the trigger for the vertigo, and the associated deafness or auditory symptoms. The duration of the vertigo episode is an important diagnostic clue and helps us to differentiate among various causes of peripheral vertigo. If it lasts for few seconds, it is characteristic of benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. Or if vertigo lasts for minutes to hours, then it points towards a Meniere's disease. Vertigo lasting for hours to days suggests a vestibular neuritis or a labyrinthitis. Next, we will discuss the triggering factors. Vertigo that is precipitated by a change in head position, such as turning in bed, getting up from lying down, or looking up, is highly suggestive of BPPV. Vertigo that is triggered by loud sounds or pressure changes, such as coughing, sneezing, or Valsalva, suggest the possibility of perilymphatic fistula or a superior semicircular canal there. Next, we move on to the general physical examination, in which the patient's level of consciousness, orientation to time, place, and person is assessed. A special attention is given to the blood pressure in both supine and sitting position to rule out any postural hypotension. Pulse rhythm is evaluated to detect arrhythmias. After completing the general physical examination, a detailed local ENT examination is performed, which includes nose, throat, neck examination in addition to the ear. Ear examination plays a very crucial part in evaluation of a patient with vertigo. It begins with the inspection of pinna, pre-auricular area, post-auricular area, external auditory canal. Then we do palpation of mastoid region and tragus to assess for any tenderness. Facial nerve examination is done to detect the involvement of facial nerve in extensive middle ear disease or any central pathology. Otoscopy is done to identify any peripheral pathology. In the otoscopy, we will evaluate the external auditory canal or tympanic membrane, as a normal tympanic membrane help us to rule out any middle ear pathology as a cause of vertigo. Tuning fork test are bedside audiological screening test performed as a part of evaluation of a patient with vertigo. Although tuning fork test does not diagnose vertigo, they are important in identifying any associated hearing loss. The tuning fork test includes Rinne's test, Weber's test, and absolute bone conduction test. Now here you can see a pure tone audiogram which helps us to identify the type and pattern of hearing loss, as well as it helps us to confirm the findings of our tuning fork test. In Meniere's disease, the pure tone audiometry typically shows a fluctuating low frequency hearing loss, and in labyrinthitis we usually get a sensory neural hearing loss of the corresponding ear. We then move on to the fistula test. The fistula test is done to detect the presence of any labyrinthine fistula, which is an abnormal communication between the middle ear and the inner ear. The test is performed by applying positive or negative pressure in the external auditory canal using a tragal pressure or pneumatic otoscope as seen in the image. The test is considered positive if this maneuver induces vertigo or nystagmus. Then we will do an ocular examination, which is also a vital component of vertigo evaluation, as eye movements are closely linked to vestibular function. Examination includes the inspection of eyelids, conjunctiva, cornea, pupil, lens, as well as the assessment of extraocular movements is done. A particular attention is paid to the presence of nystagmus. As told by my colleague, nystagmus is defined as an involuntary rhythmic oscillatory movement of the eye consisting of a slow phase and a fast corrective phase. Based on the direction of eye movement, nystagmus can be horizontal nystagmus, a torsional nystagmus, or a vertical nystagmus. We will next do a vestibular function test. These tests in this first is Romberg's test, Sharpen-Romberg test, Untenberger test, tandem gate test, next is finger nose test, Nishin test, and this diadochokinesis. Now we will do the positional test. Positional maneuvers like Dix-Hallpike test is gold standard for diagnosing posterior canal BPPV. The patient is rapidly moved from a sitting position to a supine position with the head turned 45 degrees to one side and extended. A positive test is indicated when we get a torsional upbeating nystagmus of the affected side. Head impulse test is also used to assess vestibulo-ocular reflex. The patient is asked to fix their gaze on a stationary target while the examiner delivers small, rapid, unpredictable head thrust to either side. In a normal individual, the eye remains fixed on the target, and in a patient with vestibular hypofunction, a corrective saccade is seen when the head is thrusted towards the affected side. A caloric test is a vestibular function test based on the principle that thermal stimulation of the external auditory canal produces convection current in the endolymph, which in turn stimulates the vestibular apparatus. A positive kinetic test indicates an intact vestibulo-ocular reflex. VNG is most commonly used objective vestibular function test. It helps us to evaluate vestibulo-ocular reflex. It records the eye movement using infrared video cameras. It helps us in identifying any unilateral or bilateral vestibular weakness and provide us a valuable information regarding peripheral versus central causes of nystagmus. We have a dedicated VNG lab in our department where we perform video nystagmography, which is a standard practice for all patients who present to our OPD with vertigo. Now, I would like to hand over to my colleague Dr. Kritika Arora to present the peripheral causes of vertigo.
One thing that needs to be stressed upon is very in a case of vertigo, history plays the most important role. In fact, all these investigations come that are just supportive elements, but it's a very nice dictum. If at the end of a detailed history-taking session, you cannot reach a proposed diagnosis, it is unlikely that you will reach a diagnosis. So this is one case where the skill of history taking is very, very important and more time needs to be spent on it.
Good morning, respected dignitaries. I'll be presenting peripheral causes of vertigo through short clinical cases, focusing on history-based diagnosis and bedside decision-making. For the first case, we have a 56-year-old female who presented to ENT OPD with recurrent episodes of vertigo since 10 days. She describes the vertigo as spinning of surrounding, which lasts for 10 to 20 seconds. It is triggered when she lies down on the right side, gets up from the bed, and on bending forward. On asking about other symptoms, she denies having any oral fullness, hearing loss, or tinnitus. There is no history of any headache or double vision, and no history of any recent viral illness. Based on just this history, what do you think could be the diagnosis? I would like to ask the audience. The diagnosis in this case is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or what we refer to as BPPV. The clues here are the very brief duration of vertigo, the positional nature, absence of any auditory symptoms, and a normal neurological examination. We diagnose BPPV by doing a Dix-Hallpike maneuver, which shows us a beaten torsional nystagmus, and we treat BPPV by doing another maneuver, which is a positional maneuver, a Pease maneuver, and we advise vestibular rehabilitation to the patient.
The principle behind this, so you've done benign positional vertigo, you managed it, you tilted the head this side, that side, but क्यों किया तुमने?
So the otoconia, which get dislodged from the utricle, they disrupt the endolymph, which causes the symptom. So we reposition the otoconia so that the symptoms.
Are you repositioning the otoconia or the otoliths or क्या कर रहे हैं?
Otoliths. Sorry. We reposition the otoliths.
Chemical structure.
Otoliths क्या होते हैं? What are they?
So there are small structures, hexagonal structures in the
Calcium, iron, क्या होते हैं?
calcium. Sir.
Calcium carbonate.
Yes.
So
Sir.
basically, it's a very simple thing to have a very small hair cell over there on top of which the calcium structure lies, and because of the age or because of whatever reason it is, they tend to fall off into the fluid over there. And then when you move your head, eddy currents are created over there, which leads to a change in the positioning of the fluid over there, so that it gives a feeling of vertigo. Okay. So whenever you are talking of any test, you should know what is the physiological significance of the test. That is very important. Okay.
Yes. For the next case, we have a 41-year-old man who came to ENT OPD complaining of recurrent episodes of vertigo. The duration of vertigo is since 6 months. Each episode lasts for 2 to 4 hours. Mainly in this case, it is associated with roaring tinnitus in the right ear, oral fullness in the right ear, and hearing loss in the right ear. The peculiar feature is the hearing goes back to normal once the episode subsides, and on examination we get a horizontal rotatory nystagmus towards the right ear, which is the affected ear. Can someone tell me which peripheral cause of vertigo will present like this? That's right, it's Meniere's disease.
So how will you differentiate Meniere's disease from the labyrinthitis?
So labyrinthitis, vestibular neuritis, sir. So in vestibular neuritis, there will be no associated hearing loss, and the patient will have a probable prior history of viral illness or URTI. That will be the preceding cause of vestibular neuritis. In labyrinthitis, so there will be associated hearing loss with vertigo along with a prior history of URTI. In this case, in this case, we think it is Meniere's disease as the patient has episodic vertigo which lasts for 2 to 4 hours. There is recovery between the episodes which gives us a fluctuating hearing loss. The patient has hearing oral fullness, and we get a triad of vertigo, tinnitus and fluctuating sensory neural hearing loss. We make the diagnosis by doing the pure tone audiometry, which shows us a low frequency sensory neural hearing loss in the early stages, and we do a MRI to rule out schwannoma. The treatment of Meniere's disease is to advise salt restriction, beta-histine, diuretics, and in refractory cases, sac decompression surgery may be required.
You talk about schwannoma, what schwannoma are you looking at? What area are you looking at?
So vestibular schwannoma can be there, which can
So anything else you need to focus your attention upon?
CP angles,
What does CP angle mean?
cerebellopontine angles.
You tell me what you mean, cerebral cortex. These are the areas which you need to look at. Just saying MRI to rule out a schwannoma, I could have a schwannoma in any part of my body. One is to specify what you want to rule out over there. Because when you write what to rule out something, you need to write the views or what area are you looking at. Okay, and then I think refractory cases on sac decompression surgery, we need to think twice about it, what we are going to do over there. But
Yes.
what is the management going to be? Salt restriction, beta-histine, diuretics, all generalized managements are there. Any other specific management, you must focus on those.
The next case, we have a 33-year-old female patient who presented to the emergency complaining of intense spinning of surrounding. It is sudden in onset, continuous and associated with vomiting. The patient is unable to stand or walk without support. There is history of mild fever and sore throat 1 week prior. On asking about associated symptoms, the patient denies any hearing loss, any tinnitus, oral fullness, and there is no neurological deficit. What could be the diagnosis here? Can somebody? It is vestibular neuritis. As the vertigo is acute, severe and continuous, and there is no hearing loss. Vestibular neuritis occasionally follows viral prodrome. The patient has severe gait ataxia. The diagnosis is made by doing head impulse test, as my colleague demonstrated. It will be positive in this case, and we'll get a horizontal rotatory nystagmus, which will be towards the healthy ear. It is treated with steroids, vestibular suppressants for the first 24 to 48 hours, and intense vestibular rehabilitation. For the next case, so vestibular suppressants, we have Stemetil, or we refer to as chlorpromazine, which gives anti-vertigo effects. So, for the next case, we have a 40-year-old male patient who presented with complaints since 3 days. The patient has complaint of vertigo, which is sudden, severe, continuous, spinning, and worsens on head movements. He has hearing loss in left ear, which is sudden and has no fluctuation. He has tinnitus in left ear, which is continuous, non-pulsatile, high-pitched ringing, and the patient has a history of upper respiratory tract infection 1 week ago. On examination, we'll get a horizontal torsional nystagmus. What could be the diagnosis? Can anybody please tell me? It is labyrinthitis. As in this case, the vertigo is sudden and continuous, worsens on head movements, and the hearing loss is non-fluctuating, and the patient presented with a history of recent viral illness. Diagnosis is made by doing a pure tone audiometry, which shows unilateral sensory neural hearing loss, a positive head impulse test, and on doing Romberg's test, the patient will sway towards the left side. It is treated by advising bed rest, vestibular suppressants, systemic steroids, and vestibular rehabilitation.
Bed rest, what would you advise for a bed rest? I mean, what would you tell the patient?
So with head elevation and head
That is
tilted.
important.
Yes, sir.
What degree of elevation would you have to do?
30 degrees, sir.
So they
With
are bed rest, both in that area that is we need to be more specific in our approach. Next question. So the etiology over here is a viral etiology.
yes, sir.
Supposing it's a bacterial etiology,
Yes, sir.
would there be what difference would be there?
So clinically, when we examine the patient, there will be pain, and the patient will
Bacterial.
bacterial. There will be pain, sir.
कुछ क्या होगा?
And on otoscopic examination, sir, if the middle ear is affected, we'll
Your diagnosis is labyrinthitis. There
labyrinthitis,
could be a viral labyrinthitis, there could be a bacterial labyrinthitis. Clinically, any differentiation?
fever, sir. There's history in both the
How much
cases.
pus will be there to cause fever in a bacterial labyrinthitis? Less than a drop also. That's the volume of it. So there will be no difference. It will be very difficult to differentiate between a viral and a bacterial labyrinthitis. So we are small. When we are having this activity, it has also become the teaching learning activity. You need to learn, you need to teach also. So that's what we need to get the messages across. These small nuances are there which in an examination point comes to as a catching point for all of you. Okay?
Yes, sir.
The hearing loss probably will not recover. So later on you will be knowing that it's bacterial probably. Once the hearing loss is done, so recover. You go back to previous time. How do you say, I say that this is posterior circulation stroke? Prove me wrong. See, these treatment of peripheral vertigo is,
Mostly rehabilitation.
the drugs are given only as a symptomatic treatment. Ultimately, the patient is going to recover on its own. The other ear is going to compensate, our tropisception is going to compensate, our vision is going to compensate. So, treatment, we don't need any treatment, we just need to rehabilitate the patient. But how do you rule out something which is life-threatening, that is posterior circulation stroke? I say that this is a posterior circulation stroke. Prove me wrong.
So there's no spontaneous nystagmus, which
There
is
is a nystagmus there.
It is a
Certain severe
horizontal-
continuous nystagmus.
yes, sir.
In the initial part, when this patient is presented, he is going to have a crazy nystagmus. The patient is going to have a crazy vertigo. And he is a 40-year-old male. How do you say that this is, see the history of UTI 1 week back, nobody will remember. Maybe UTI here 1 week later, I will not even remember. I will be always concentrating on what my current problem is. So you tell me, how do you say that this is not a posterior circulation? See, if you miss a posterior circulation stroke here, he is going to die. There is a limited time which posterior circulation stroke, if it's embolic, will give you to treat the patient. All this leather cannot rule out. So investigations differentiate that's it.
So we can do an MRI to rule out.
Even if it's a negative, doesn't matter. You have ruled out something which is life-threatening. All this. मैं gynecology का होता बता सकता हूँ. तुम सोच सकते क्या होगा? Cerebellum ना होगा. कौन सा?
So not only that, also whenever we are looking at these cases for vertigo, the audiogram, the significance of the serial audiogram is more important than a point audiogram. So it's only then what Dr. Vineas just said was that it's a week later that you are going to have it. So today, tomorrow, maybe I need to keep on repeating my audiogram to have a follow-up. That's going to give me my prognosis at the end of the day, what is going to be my prognosis.
Nobody will question you if you miss labyrinthitis, if you miss Meniere's. Even in Meniere's also, there is something called primary Meniere's, defective Meniere's, probable Meniere's. You cannot just jump to the diagnosis of Meniere's disease. The battery of investigation needs to be done. You need to do an autoimmune workup, which you have not mentioned in those. But okay, doesn't matter. Don't miss something which is life-threatening. Because people are going to come back to you. If you miss a posterior circulation stroke, you are in trouble.
See, vertigo is something which looks very dangerous, but most of the time it is not dangerous. But those few things which are dangerous should never be missed out. There are not many things which are life-threatening in vertigo. It looks, the patient feels he is going to die. I mean, there is no limit to what the patient feels. But most of them are simple benign lesions which settle down themselves. But these situations you cannot miss.
Clinically, there is a test called VAST, which is a vertebral artery blockage screening test. in which we make the patient lie down on a bed and we just hang the head slightly around 10 to 15 degrees lower than the horizontal, and if that induces a very strong vertigo or a very strong nystagmus, we have to suspect a posterior circulation block. So that is a test which we can clinically do before going ahead with an MRI, or if you are in a setup where an MRI is not available. Because if that is the situation, that needs to be treated more urgently. And secondly, in that situation, we cannot do other position maneuvers which we do for the peripheral.
Another thing that comes across is, when the patient has an active spontaneous nystagmus which is visible, quite a few of these tests become irrelevant at that point of time, because what do you see over there? What we are trying to do is we are trying to elicit a nystagmus, we are trying to elicit a symptom complex over here. But if the patient already has a continuous vertigo, he already has a continuous nystagmus, then it becomes a thing which is very difficult to analyze. So elicit किया तो क्या किया उसमें से? So you need to have this much of thought. Also the history would be whether he has already taken something propylprazine or something to suppress his vertigo, because then in any case you are not going to elicit any response with your test over there. So that is why history in these cases are very important, and you must go through the history in detail. And another thing, what you are mentioning, such as we are having a postgraduate teaching activity over here. Had it been at an undergraduate level, I would have loved it. But at a postgraduate level, you need to go a bit higher onto that. Okay?
Yes. For the last peripheral case, we have a 65-year-old male patient who presented with complaint of imbalance since 2 days. He complains of difficulty in maintaining balance while walking and turning quickly, and he has a sense of surroundings moving in a vertical direction. He is a known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, which is poorly controlled. It is associated with hearing loss as well as tinnitus. However, there is no history of ear discharge and headache. The patient gives a history of admission for urosepsis, for which he was treated with IV amikacin since 10 days. What could be the diagnosis here? It is ototoxicity. As there is bilateral vestibular hyperfunction in this case, recent aminoglycoside exposure, oscillopsia and imbalance, and hearing loss. The diagnosis is mainly clinical and based on high clinical suspicion. Audiometry will show us sensory neural hearing loss, and the vestibular function test can be done to come to the final diagnosis. It is treated by discontinuation of the offending agent, antioxidants, vestibular rehabilitation, correction of the renal functions, and strict glycemic control.
Then go one slide back. It's a chronic subdural hematoma. Patient have all features which in a chronic SDH patient not able to pass with. You said the patient is able to, there is a sense of imbalance. The imbalance also will be there. Patient will have some memory loss, which you will say that is probably because of age. So there are three features for a chronic SDH. How do you rule out? He's been admitted for urosepsis, probably he was having urinary incontinence, he is not able to pass urine. So that's why he was admitted, for which he received amikacin. So we are saying that it's probably amikacin which is causing all this. But how do you say that it's not a chronic SDH? Chronic SDH is very common. Patient will have only three features: imbalance, not able to pass urine, and memory issues.
So there will be a history of trauma in these cases, history of falls.
Jesus will be totally fine. Patient will be walking, probably walking to your opinion.
So we can do a CT scan to rule out.
And VAS test which ma'am said recently, this is for basically canal stenosis. Somebody who probably can develop a, once the stroke is done, once the artery is blocked or once there is a hemorrhage, the test doesn't have any relevance. Then it's very difficult to elicit that test positively because already the patient has symptoms. So do a small contrast CT, you can see a percentage. EDH and SDH you should be able to, नहीं बहुत अच्छी बात है, can be because of amikacin. But a small test will help you rule out SDH. It's very common.
Another small thing, now again comes the significance on the wording which are there. Dr. Kapoor also mentioned which are there, I don't know why I joined a couple of minutes late. giddiness, lightheadedness, unsteadiness. The words of the patients are very important when you are reaching a diagnosis over here. You need to differentiate between these various things which are there. It would be whether it's a central cause or a peripheral cause or a true vertigo or a false vertigo. These things are important when you take the evaluation.
Now, I would like to invite Dr. Pavni Agrawal from Department of Neurology to cover the central causes of vertigo.
Good morning to all. I am Dr. Pavni Agrawal from the Department of Neurology, and I would be talking about central causes of vertigo. Central vertigo refers to vertigo which arises due to pathology which involves the central vestibular system, and it represents a disorder of the central processing and integration of the vestibular signals and is often associated with neurological signs. So the central vestibular system includes the vestibular nuclei, which are the central processing hubs of the vestibular system. They receive peripheral vestibular input and they integrate it with visual, cerebellar, proprioceptive and cortical signals to control the eye movements, gaze holding, posture and balance, spatial orientation and autonomic responses. Hence, central vertigo refers to dysfunction of the vestibular nuclei and or their connections. Now, to further understand central vertigo, we will take a case-based approach. The first case is that of a 62-year-old male with vascular risk factors who presented with sudden onset continuous severe vertigo for the last 3 years, which was associated with vomiting and inability to sit or stand without support, which is a red flag sign. And it points towards cerebellar involvement. He also had hoarseness of voice and difficulty in swallowing liquids, which points towards a lower cranial nerve involvement. There was no hearing loss, tinnitus or any oral fullness. On examination, he had spontaneous horizontal torsional nystagmus, which was direction changing along with gaze evoked nystagmus. The head impulse test was negative, which then again supported a central lesion. Patient also had severe truncal ataxia, limb ataxia, crossed sensory findings, reduced gag reflex, and ipsilateral Horner syndrome. All of this pointed towards a brainstem cerebellar process. Hence, the hyperacute onset and the continuous nature immediately raised concern for a vascular central cause rather than a peripheral vestibular cause, and hence the probable diagnosis in this case was a posterior circulation stroke. So based on the clinical findings, the lesion was localized to the inferior cerebellum, vestibular nuclei and lateral medulla, which is very characteristic for a pica territory involvement, which was then confirmed on MRI brain, which showed diffusion restriction in the similar territory, hence further reinstating that it was a posterior inferior cerebellar artery acute infarct. And we managed the patient as per the acute stroke protocol. The second case is that of a 34-year-old female who presented to us with episodes of recurrent vertigo which used to last for hours and was occurring over a span of last 1 year. The episodic nature with complete recovery in between suggested a paroxysmal central disorder. Each vertigo episode was accompanied by classic migrainous features such as throbbing headache, photophobia, phonophobia and motion sensitivity. She had no hearing loss, no tinnitus or oral fullness, and which then eventually made the peripheral cochleovestibular disorder very less likely. On neurological examination, there was no persistent abnormality in between the attacks and hence was also normal. MRI brain was done to rule out any structural causes. Hence, this pattern, which is of an episodic symptom with normal interictal findings, is typical of a central vestibular disorder, particularly vestibular migraine. Pathophysiologically, vestibular migraine occurs due to migraine-related dysfunction of the vestibular nuclei and its central connections, including the vestibulocerebellar circuits, which leads to abnormal integration of vestibular signals without any structural damage. Management
therefore focuses on migraine prophylaxis, trigger avoidance, and vestibular rehabilitation. The last case is that of a 48-year-old male who presented to us with slowly progressive vertigo and imbalance for the past 6 months. Over time, he also developed right-sided hearing loss, intermittent tinnitus, and facial numbness, which suggested involvement beyond a pure vestibular disorder. On examination, there was spontaneous horizontal torsional nystagmus with gaze-evoked nystagmus, reduced hearing on the right side, reduced right corneal reflex along with ipsilateral limb ataxia. The presence of long tract signs and papilledema indicated brainstem compression with raised intracranial pressure. Hence, slowly progressive vertigo and imbalance with unilateral cochlear symptoms, associated cranial nerve involvement, cerebellar signs, and features of raised ICP localized the lesion to the cerebropontine angle within the posterior fossa. MRI brain with contrast confirmed a posterior fossa mass in the right CPA region and was then managed by the neurosurgery team for definitive treatment. So to summarize, we suspect a central cause when vertigo is associated with continuous or progressively worsening course, associated neurological signs such as dysphagia, dysarthria, diplopia, limb or truncal ataxias, long tract signs, abnormal ocular motor findings, specifically vertical nystagmus, internuclear ophthalmoplegia, and occasionally a normal head impulse test. Hence, this type of clinical picture, specifically in a patient with acute vertigo, is particularly concerning and should prompt for immediate evaluation. Thank you. Now I would like to call Dr. Kunal Mistry from the Department of Radiology to take the presentation forward.
Good morning, respected dignitaries. I, Dr. Kunal Mistry, second year resident from the Department of Radiodiagnosis, will be taking the radiological evaluation of the vertigo. So there is a T1 post-contrast axial MR sequence. So the post-contrast enhancement of the left vestibular nerve. So this is mainly seen in the case of the vestibular neuritis. There is a HRCT temporal bone image. So the abnormal ossification of the cochlea and the semicircular canals with the obliteration of the normal labyrinthine spaces. So these features are consistent with the labyrinthitis ossificans. There is an axial HRCT temporal bone imaging. There is an abnormal communication between the perilymphatic space of the inner ear and the middle ear. So these features are mainly consistent with the perilymphatic fistula. There is an axial T2 weighted MR image. So an ill-defined hyper-intense area involving the right cerebellar hemisphere. Showing the right cerebellar hemisphere with the opposite side appearing normal, consistent with the cerebellar infarct, most likely involving the posterior inferior cerebellar artery territory. There is an axial post-contrast T1 weighted MR sequence. So well-defined, intensely enhancing extraaxial mass in the right cerebellopontine angle with the extension into the internal auditory canal, producing a typical ice cream cone appearance, which is mainly consistent with the vestibular schwannoma. Now I'd like to hand over to Dr. Krupali Bua to present the management of vertigo.
As a clinician, when vertigo comes to us, sometimes we don't know what exactly to write on the form. What do you expect us to write on the form so that you do the right investigation? CMRI or plain MRI?
Contrast in an MRI is much more better if you are suspecting the central causes.
Okay.
And if you are suspecting the peripheral causes, then HRCT temporal bone will be much more helpful.
Okay. Just CMRI brain is needed.
Contrast enhanced MRI.
So in case of infarct, non-contrast will also work. You have to order the diffusion and ADC.
Good morning, dignitaries. Myself, Dr. Krupali Bua, third year resident of Department of ENT. I'll be discussing about the management of vertigo. Vertigo can be managed by medically, surgically, and by rehabilitation therapy. Medical management is usually given with the rehabilitation therapy, and if that doesn't work out, then we go for surgical management.
The principle of treatment in acute vertigo is characterized by the sudden severe spinning sensation, which is often associated with nausea and vomiting. At this stage, the patient is highly symptomatic and distressed. Hence, the treatment will focus on vestibular suppressants. The vestibular suppressants will reduce the abnormal vestibular inputs which are reaching through the vein. The vestibular suppressants which we give in acute vertigo are antihistamines, antiemetics, benzodiazepams, 5-HT3 antagonists, and anticholinergics. Antiemetics itself does not treat vertigo, but they give symptomatic relief, allowing the hydration and oral intake of other drugs. So it is combined with the antihistamines. The principle for long-standing vertigo pharmacotherapy is to avoid the vestibular suppressants, to promote the central compensation, to treat the disease-specific causes, and to combine it with the vestibular rehabilitation. Commonly used drugs in the chronic vertigo are beta-histin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and diuretics. Beta-histin is the main rehabilitative drug. It is given in almost all the patients of vertigo. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it is used in persistent postural perceptual dizziness, anxiety-associated dizziness, and vestibular migraine. Diuretics can be given in Meniere's disease and semicircular canal dehiscence. Now we'll discuss about the treatment approaches for the BPPV. It can be approached through the rehabilitation method or by surgical treatment. In rehabilitation, we have liberatory maneuver. It is mainly used in cupulolithiasis. Sudden head movement dislodges the particle from the cupula. For this, we perform the Simond maneuver. Here is a demonstration for the Simond maneuver. Patient is seated on the edge of the table or a bed in a sitting upright position. Let's assume the affected ear is right ear. Rotate the head of a patient at 45 degree on the left side and quickly make them lie down on the right side with chin up at 45 degree. Hold this position for 30 to 60 seconds or till dizziness to subside. Now move patient from right side lying to the left side. Note is made that the chin should be faced diagonally downwards at 45 degree. We'll hold this position also for 30 to 60 seconds or till dizziness to subside. Bring patient back to the normal position with head facing downward. The next maneuver is for the particle repositioning. Here we use modified Apley's maneuver, which is the mainstay for BPPV management. It moves autoconia back to the utricle. Here is a demonstration for modified Apley's maneuver. In this, let's assume the affected ear is right ear. We'll rotate the head of the patient on the right side at 45 degree and quickly lie down the patient on the right side. Head should be extended at 30 degree and should be rotated at 45 degree on the right side. Wait for the nystagmus or the vertigo to subside and hold this for 30 to 60 seconds. Rotate the head on the left side and we'll hold this position also for 30 to 60 seconds. Now we'll rotate completely patient 90 degree on the left side along with the head facing downward. Keep patient in this position for 30 seconds and make patient seated in the normal position with the head movement facing downward. The third is a habituation exercise. It is used in residual dizziness or in the recurrent chronic BPPV. For this, we perform Brand-Daroff exercise. It is a home treatment for BPPV. Usually, the patient can perform this maneuver at home by their own. In this, ask a patient to sit on the edge of the table or a bed. Patient will rotate the head 45 degree towards the left side and quickly lie down on the right side. Wait for dizziness to subside or hold this position for 30 to 60 seconds. Patient will come back to the normal sitting position. Wait for 30 seconds. Now look on the right side at 45 degree and quickly lie down on the left side. The surgical treatment for BPPV approaches is the posterior canal occlusion, labyrinthectomy and singular neurectomy. Now we'll discuss about the surgical management of vertigo. The indications for surgery in vertigo, it is that if the patient have a severe or recurrent vertigo, if there is failure of medical therapy and vestibular rehabilitation, if there is a disabling vertigo which is affecting day-to-day life, or if there is a well-documented unilateral disease like Meniere's disease and some of the selected patients of BPPV who are refractory to the positional rehabilitation. The goal here is only to control the vertigo and it does not necessarily improve the hearing. The surgeries which we perform in the patient of vertigo is the chemical labyrinthectomy, endolymphatic sac surgery, vestibular neurectomy and surgical labyrinthectomy. Now we'll discuss about the rehabilitation therapy. In that, first we have is a vestibular rehabilitation. The aim of vestibular rehabilitation is to promote the central vestibular compensation, to make the patient habituate about their condition, to enhance the adaptation of vestibular, ocular and spinal reflex. Patient may initially have the exacerbation. We advise the patient to do postural control exercises and conditioning activities. Patient is advised to do twice daily, and mostly the improvement is seen after 4 to 6 weeks. The exercise which we advise a patient to do at home for vestibular rehabilitation is Cothron-Cooksey exercise. Exercise which can be done in bed is looking up and downwards, looking alternatively left and right side. Exercises which can be done in sitting position is shrugging and rotating shoulders, bending forward and picking up the objects. Head movements which can be done is the bending alternatively forward and backward. The next rehabilitation method is the tinnitus. In this we have different methods like tinnitus retraining therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, habituation, tinnitus maskers are used, and pharmacotherapy. Pharmacotherapy itself does not treat tinnitus, but it is given as an adjuvant therapy for a definite management. The third rehabilitation method is the hearing. Hearing rehabilitation is a process of enhancing the quality of life, improving the communication ability and to reducing the handicap due to hearing loss. The two types of hearing aids which we have is the analog hearing aid and digital hearing aid. Now I would like to call upon the stage Dr. Shelly Modi ma'am, Assistant Professor for the management of
I would like to conclude this session by stating that vertigo is not a symptom. It is a symptom, it is not a disease. We just do not have to prescribe labyrinthine sedatives or vestibular suppressants left, right and center. This will actually delay the compensation, so it is better that we actually take a proper history, we examine the patient, we see what is the probable cause and then treat it accordingly. A multidisciplinary team approach is essential. Many patients may have residual balance impairment even after the resolution of acute vertigo, highlighting the importance of long-term vestibular rehabilitation. I'd like to give a vote of thanks. I would like to thank the management and all the dignitaries for providing us the infrastructure and the resources. The ENT department, neurology department and radiology department, all the faculty members, residents and the medical staff. And lastly, all the volunteers who helped us demonstrate all the different tests and materials. Thank you.
Cover up the whole topic. I mean, it's more than 400 pages of